In our last video, we covered how the Council of Trent established a stable operating framework for Catholic doctrine, worship, and clergy discipline that remained essentially unchanged for roughly 400 years. This video is about what finally changed that framework. The Second Vatican Council, generally known as Vatican II, convened between 1962 and 1965. It's genuinely one of the most consequential events in modern Catholic Church history, reshaping everything from how Mass is celebrated to how the Church understands its relationship with the wider modern world. This video covers why it happened, what it actually changed, and why it remains, even today, a genuinely debated and discussed topic among Catholics. Welcome to Pope Pulse. If you haven't seen our previous video on the Council of Trent, that context helps explain just how significant a 4th-century framework shift like this actually was. Like and subscribe to help us grow together as family. We actually touched on this briefly in an earlier video in this series, but it's worth expanding on here. Pope John XXIII, elected in 1958 at the age of 76, was widely expected at the time of his election to be a relatively brief, low-impact, transitional pope, chosen partly because of his advanced age and partly because cardinals reportedly favored a less disruptive, more cautious choice following the considerably longer, more consequential pontificate of his immediate predecessor. Instead, in January of 1959, only a few months into his papacy, John XXIII announced his intention to convene an ecumenical council, a formal, worldwide gathering of Catholic bishops, catching many observers, including reportedly some of his closest advisors, genuinely by surprise. John explained his reasoning using the Italian word aggiornamento, roughly translating to updating or bringing up to date, expressing a specific desire to help the Church better engage with and address the considerably changed modern world of the mid-20th century, a world that looked genuinely different from the one Trent's framework had originally been designed to address roughly 4 centuries earlier. When Vatican II formally opened in October of 1962, it brought together roughly 2,500 bishops from around the world, along with numerous official theological advisors and, in a genuinely significant departure from earlier church councils, invited observers from various other Christian traditions, including Orthodox and Protestant churches, reflecting a considerably more ecumenical, dialogue-oriented approach than most previous councils in church history had generally embraced. This scale and genuinely global composition itself reflected significant changes in the Catholic Church since Trent's own era 4 centuries earlier. A church that had grown considerably beyond its historically European-centered base, with bishops now attending from Africa, Asia, and the Americas in numbers that would have been genuinely unimaginable at the time of Trent's own considerably more geographically limited sessions. Pope John XXIII died in 1963, partway through the Council's proceedings, and his successor, Pope Paul VI, whom we'll cover in more detail in an upcoming biography video given his broader historical significance, oversaw the Council's remaining sessions through to its conclusion in December of 1965. For most ordinary Catholics, the single most immediately visible change resulting from Vatican II was in how Mass itself was actually celebrated. Prior to the Council, Mass had generally been celebrated in Latin, with the priest generally facing the altar, his back toward the congregation, following a form that had remained largely stable since roughly the time of the Council of Trent itself. Vatican II's reforms permitted, and eventually led to the widespread adoption of Mass celebrated in local vernacular languages rather than exclusively in Latin, along with priests generally facing the congregation directly during the celebration, changes intended specifically to increase lay participation and comprehension during worship. These specific liturgical changes were formally implemented gradually across the years immediately following the Council, culminating in a comprehensively revised Roman Missal introduced in 1969 under Pope Paul VI. It's worth noting directly that these particular liturgical changes remain, even today, among the most actively debated and discussed aspects of Vatican II's legacy within the Catholic Church, with a meaningful minority of Catholics continuing to prefer the earlier Latin Mass form, a topic connected to more recent developments we've actually referenced briefly elsewhere on this channel regarding contemporary church governance decisions around who may celebrate that earlier form today. Vatican II's reforms extended well beyond liturgical changes alone, addressing a genuinely wide range of theological and institutional questions across 16 separate formal documents produced across the Council's various sessions. The Council issued significant new statements on religious freedom, affirming a considerably more explicit respect for individual conscience and religious liberty than earlier official church teaching had generally emphasized. It issued a genuinely significant document on the Church's relationship with non-Christian religions, including notably more positive, explicitly stated language regarding the Church's relationship with Judaism specifically, addressing centuries of considerably more strained historical relations we may explore in more depth in a future video in this series. It also emphasized what's generally referred to as the universal call to holiness, a theological emphasis on the genuine spiritual significance and vocation of lay Catholics, not solely ordained clergy and those in formal religious life, in ways that meaningfully shifted broader Catholic self-understanding regarding the laity's own role within the wider Church. The Council additionally addressed the Church's relationship with the modern world more broadly, including questions around social justice, human dignity, and engagement with contemporary social and political issues, reflecting the same underlying aggiornamento impulse that had originally motivated John XXIII to convene the Council in the first place. It's important to be direct about something regarding Vatican II that distinguishes it from most of the earlier historical topics we've covered in this series. Its specific legacy and proper interpretation remain genuinely, actively debated among Catholics even today, roughly 6 decades after its conclusion, in ways that considerably more historically settled events like the Council of Trent generally do not. Some Catholics and theologians emphasize what's sometimes called a hermeneutic of continuity, generally interpreting Vatican II's documents as a genuine, careful development of existing Catholic teaching consistent with everything that came before it, rather than any kind of fundamental doctrinal rupture or reversal. Others have emphasized a more expansive reading of the Council's reforms, generally understanding them as representing a considerably more significant, transformative shift in Catholic theology and institutional practice. This genuine, ongoing interpretive debate has directly shaped considerable internal Catholic discussion and, at certain points, genuine institutional tension across the decades since the Council's conclusion, extending right up through more recent papacies we've discussed elsewhere on this channel. This isn't a debate this particular video is positioned to resolve, and reasonable, faithful Catholics genuinely hold different views on exactly how to properly interpret and apply Vatican II's specific documents and reforms. What's clear, regardless of interpretive perspective, is that the Council represents a genuinely significant turning point in modern Catholic Church history, comparable in institutional significance to Trent itself 4 centuries earlier, even as its precise meaning and appropriate ongoing application remain genuinely, actively contested. Every pope since Vatican II's conclusion in 1965 has governed within a Church directly shaped by its specific reforms, and each has, in various documented ways, engaged directly with questions about its proper interpretation and ongoing application, a pattern that connects directly to several more recent developments we've covered elsewhere on this channel regarding contemporary papal decisions and priorities. Understanding Vatican II and the genuine, ongoing debate surrounding its legacy actually helps make considerable sense of various more recent Church news stories and papal decisions we may cover in future videos, since so much of contemporary internal Catholic discussion, and at certain points genuine institutional tension, traces directly back to these same underlying interpretive questions first raised by the Council's specific reforms roughly 6 decades ago. So that's Vatican II, an unexpected, genuinely transformative council called by a pope initially expected to accomplish very little, ultimately reshaping everything from how Mass is celebrated to how the Church understands its own relationship with the wider modern world, and remaining, even today, a genuinely significant and actively debated turning point in the long history we've been tracing throughout this entire series. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Catholic Church history, subscribe to Pope Pulse for more, and let me know in the comments, are you more drawn to the continuity or the transformation reading of Vatican II's legacy? Or do you think that's ultimately the wrong way to frame the question entirely?